So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to the last video that I'm going to be recording today, and amazingly my voice has actually managed to hold up through all of it. And this is another scenario. This one is made by Outfit, and this, I believe, just like the previous one, is the first one that he made. Obviously he has made quite a few, and I've shown quite a few since then, but this was the first one that he made, and this is a more refined version of it. And I should say, right from the off, that the defenders will not outright win this battle. They are not intended to win this battle. All of these scenarios are part of a theoretical narrative campaign in the future, which eventually, when it's finished at some point, we might cover in chronological order. But this is obviously sort of the bridge between two larger set-piece battles. I mean, it's called The Pursuit, so you can picture it as sort of a fighting retreat by the good forces of Middle-earth against an enormous horde of orcs who will be pursuing after them. And indeed, something like this battle would actually be an interesting one to see a time limit on, because that would give the defenders a potential victory condition they could meet, as opposed to just being sort of a case of kill a certain amount of troops. And I believe the amount of troops that the intended sweet spot, well, if the defenders don't kill 75% of the orcs, that can be counted as a total loss. If they kill between 75 and 80%, I believe that would be sort of acceptable, but still not a win. But if the defenders kill more than 80% of the orc army, then that can be counted as a success for the defenders. So keep that in mind as we move forward. But we'll be having a look at the army compositions now, and I was actually in this one, and I'm playing as one of the attacking armies. I'll scoot through the orcs quite quickly, because there's essentially all four of the orc factions are here in some capacity, and all of them, of course, are sort of got a very varied roster between them. The rules, of course, there are rules. Initially, all of the attacking armies can use all of their units to deal with the outer cavalry force, which we will go through in a moment. But as soon as it comes to the canyon, you have to attack in waves, because this will prevent the blobs from getting too enormous. That can be a problem with these scenarios. I feel like rules to prevent those blobs are kind of necessary, otherwise the frame rate tanks, and also it will always go in favour of the orcs if they outnumber the defenders hugely, if they can just commit everything at once, because pushing with sheer numbers is too good of a tactic to pass up. So having a look through my line, obviously it is night, so visibility might be a bit of an issue out here in the fields, but when we get to the canyon there's going to be so many torches that it shouldn't be too bad. I've got 4 units of Snaga Stalkers, 3 units of the Orc Fellas, and I think 3 units as well of the Orc Marauders, as well as some Goblin Trackers. So I've got quite a heavy amount of lower tier troops. In fact, I think I've got the most trash units of all of the attacking armies, but I also have a pretty decent elite corps back here, including the Shielded Trolls of Angmar, some Guardians of Karndu, and some Blackwatch Legion as well, so I can push through the line in addition to the Witch Realm units. Looking through my allies, we also have, well, that's actually my Barrow-wights. I've got a unit Barrow-wights as well, which will be interesting to see in action. As we move through the armies, we've also got Froggy playing as Isengard, and Isengard, of course, there's no crossbows on the field for the attackers, I don't think. There might be some for the Misty Mountains, but we'll go through them in a moment. I do not think Isengard have got their crossbows, though. It's more a case of just their infantry. So they've got Reavers, Raiders, Baneguard, infantry. I believe they've got some Nazkai and some Uruk-hai Berserkers as well, so they've got a pretty nice skirmishing force. They've also got some Snaga Skirmishers, and indeed they do have the Nazkai. And looking a little bit further back here, we have Outfit, well, Goddess Nimhain as he's called on Steam, who's playing as Mordor, and again he's got some Orc Fodder, he's got some Morannon infantry, some Temple Guard. Again, the amount of range firepower we have is limited, but it is present at least. We've got some dismounted Temple Inquisitors as well, and also some Troll Drummers, as I'm sure you will be able to hear as the battle goes along. And moving over here, we also have Rudal, played by Arcturos. He's got the most in terms of a range contingent, because he has some Javelins in his army, including the Etenmoor's Troll Hunters and some Ferodrim Javelins somewhere. He's also got some Dunman Pikes and some Angmar's Enslavers, but other than that, he's got mainly Dunman units and sort of standard Rudal stuff like the Clansmen and the infantry. So he's going to need to do some damage with his Javelins, and if he does, we should be in a pretty good place. And then finally we have Bobo playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. It's a similar story here. They've got a lot of their basic stuff like the Heavy Goblin Spears and infantry. They've also got some Black Uruks of the Mountains, a few units of individual quality as well, like the Goblin King's Bodyguard, and I think he's got 1 unit of the Blackback Berserkers hidden somewhere, and a unit of the White Uruks Fearmongers. So a pretty decent army all in all. And then over here is the Mordor and Misty Mountains Fast Movers, which they will be essentially to prevent the fact that the cavalry is going to be cycle charging the initial part of our army to death pretty efficiently. When the cavalry is activated, that's basically a sign that feeding time for the Rohirrim is over. And I think, well, in terms of the playing time, it was 10 minutes, but obviously accounting for lag and such, that will be less than 10 minutes in the actual full pace replay. So we've got Volk's Champions, Drake Broodlings, and then up here we've got the Mordor Cavalry, which is some Melkor's Chosen and 2 units of the Temple Inquisitors. So this is a very, very serious cavalry line, anti-cavalry line as well, and that is kind of necessary because as we go into the defenders over here, we will see that Alasan is playing as Rohan. He's got some Riddermark cavalry, so some basic lancers, and then moving through you'll see that things start to get a little bit more serious. There's some Aerid of Aldberg, so some slightly better lancers, and then back here we have some more Riddermark cavalry and some Riddermark skirmishers as well. So we've got some Javcav, which can potentially be used for good hit and runs considering the fact we have limited archers. A couple of units of the Red Shields of Erkenbrand. Bit of a controversial unit at the moment. There's talk of changing them a little bit, and I kind of agree with that, but we'll go into that at a later date because there's other things to be getting on with right now. But more specifically, the danger is going to be these 2 Sons of Yore, because even a unit of knights that's taken pretty hefty losses and only has 6 or 7 unit models can still do a huge amount of damage because they become so slippery. So, let us begin. And Alasan is immediately going to be charging towards the Orc armies. You can see over here that the Riddermark cavalry is going to be charging. They've changed their target at the last minute from the Reavers to the Raiders, which is probably for the best because the Reavers do have a higher amount of damage, which will potentially be able to kill off some of these Riddermark cavalry a little bit quicker. Some arrows are going to be firing in from the Uruk-hai archers, I believe, or is that might actually be the Temple Guard that's firing in, but honestly, if the Temple Guard waste their ammunition on Riddermark cavalry, that's a pretty good situation for the attackers to be in, because the archers are going to be much more deadly to their defences later on, which will go through the army composition of the defenders as it becomes more relevant. Because at the moment, obviously, it's just going to be the outer cavalry raiders. We have the Riddermark skirmishers who are firing their javelins indiscriminately into the Isengard blobs. And then over here we also have the Riddermark cavalry and the Aerid of Aldberg cycle charging in and out. Now, something that Alasan did in this battle, which I think is a bit of a mistake, is he split his cavalry up all along the attackers' lines. I feel as though that's a bit of a mistake, particularly going for the Misty Mountains at all with your cavalry is not very efficient because the Misty Mountains have got so many units, like the White Uruk Spearmongers and the Spears. They're also being backed up by the Rudauer Spearmen as they move forward here as the rain comes down ever more heavily. This part of the battlefield is definitely not the area where you're going to get the most efficiency out of your cavalry. Isengard, however, are without their pikes and their crossbows, which is odd for them, and I definitely would be very tempted to try and take full advantage of that as the rain continues to come down, as the Aerid of Aldberg charge into these Orc fodder. Again, another soft target, because really all the Rohirrim can hope to do out here is to thin out our numbers. Because if we have too much in terms of numbers as we move forward into the Box Canyon defence, which we will see in a moment, the defenders are going to have a much tougher time of it. As you can see the Aerid of Aldberg again charging in, and his cavalry is being split up ever more, and Froggy is chasing him down with raiders and with more raiders in fact, but this is just Alasan, rather than charging into these units and aggressively pursuing them and trying to get rid of them quickly, instead he's retreating from them, and this is stretching his cavalry out ever more so. And he's also employing very much hit and run tactics in the sense that he's charging in and then he's almost immediately leaving melee, almost before they can do the full amount of damage. Over here you can see the Aerid of Aldberg firing in again. Numenorian Shadow Guard from Goddess Nimhain, which were hidden, so another archer unit is firing in. They won't do a huge amount of damage to the Sons of Yore. Visibility is a bit of a problem on a night battle, especially when it's raining like this, but only at the moment. As you can see, the Aerid of Aldberg and the Sons of Yore charging into the Uruk-hai Raiders, and Froggy is taking a decent amount of damage, but if we look back over to here, where the Red Shields are, the Red Shields for a start, they don't have the highest charge bonus. They are Horse Archers, they have a charge of 1. They're also Horse Archers. Now, the Horse Archers should do a decent amount of damage to Rudauer pikes and such, but the Misty Mountains and Rudauer are well positioned to deal with this cavalry, and it's definitely a part of the battlefield where if I was Alasan, I wouldn't have focused on Misty Mountains or Rudauer at all. I would have gone for my army and with Froggy's army. As we can see, we're just going to go back up to 1 speed as the arrows go flying into the Riddermark cavalry. Definitely a better target for the archers because they are a lot more squishy than the Sons of Yore. There's Riddermark cavalry in combat over there, but we're going to ride with them as they stop. There are Riddermark cavalry in here, relentlessly charging into these Uruk-hai Raiders, so now Alasan is going to be targeting down the Uruk-hai on the periphery, which is good, because they need to rob us of our numbers. As you can see, my army's coming down the hill in loose formation to try and help Froggy, but Froggy actually advanced away from my support, amazingly enough, so it was a little bit difficult for me to keep pace with him, particularly because most of my stuff is lower tier that I've sent forward. But one thing that I would definitely have recommended Froggy to do is put all of his stuff in loose formation and make himself very wide, because then the cavalry's not going to do as much damage off the charge, and they're also going to be at more risk of getting stuck in your units. This is a bit of a loss as well. Uruk-hai infantry are a unit of decent quality, and they took a charge there from the Riddermark cavalry, but the Riddermark cavalry leaves melee almost immediately, and not as much damage there was done as could have been done. And the Sons of Yorl also charging into the side. Very weak charge that, though. They didn't really get up to full speed before charging in. The rain is making matters a little bit difficult to see, but nonetheless, I don't do night battles very often. In fact, I don't think I've ever shown a night battle before, so it's something different at least. Now, these Riddermark cavalrymen, they can't afford to stop. More than anything else, these are the glass cannons of the Rohan line. They're quite fragile. As my Snaga continue to move forward, let's go and have a look over here on the other side. Sons of Yorl are still in relatively good shape. They've taken a few losses actually, but these red shields have been pretty handily hacked down. They were caught in melee with the Rude Hour and the Misty Mountains infantry for a little bit, and I don't believe they have multiple HP anymore, which is interesting. You know, I think that kind of takes away from their purpose a little bit, but regardless, that's something that we'll talk about another time, because the red shields are a bit of a conundrum at the moment. The Sons of Yorl charging into more Uruk-hai raiders, so Froggy's definitely borne the brunt of most of the damage Alasan has been able to mete out. You can see that he is now trying to sort of get in and amongst these units. The Sons of Yorl are now sort of well in here, and at this point Alasan's cavalry is quite split up, and you can see here that he's sort of going into our lines, but this is sort of making it more likely that he's going to get caught. It's like a spider's web, where Froggy and my infantry are sort of mine and Froggy's infantry are sort of chasing down these Sons of Yorl. They do manage to get in and around, however. Numenorian Shadow Guard taking charge from what's left of the Riddermark skirmishers. But at this point it's just about zoning out the cavalry, and they're so sort of split up and spread out that the individual amounts of damage they're going to be able to do is limited. There are also Orc Javelins from Outfit's army over there which have routed the red shields, so that's not good for them. As you see as well, I think there is a unit of cavalry over on this side. And honestly, if I was Alasan at this point, this Riddermark cavalry, my elites I was purposely keeping back so they didn't take a cav charge, but some of my units back here are pretty vulnerable to a cav charge, honestly. I mean, something like my General's Bodyguard, which is the Witch Realm Blackguard, which is over there, it's only really in a sustained fight that cavalry will take damage. Off a charge, I might lose some very important units, but instead he does decide to try and charge into my Orc Marauders. But so many of my units there were in loose formation that he just sort of went in, didn't do a lot of damage, and I'm also using my fire arrows for my Goblin Trackers, mainly because they look nice, not because they're more effective. But the Riddermark cavalry is going to struggle, because most of the units I sent forward are lower tier. And again, the Spider's Web, which is the best way to deal with a cav charge like this. Like, if Froggy had also done this, in addition to Bobo, and we all advanced forward all at once, there would be very little that Alasan would be able to do. But at this point, I believe the offensive cavalry is moving forward. Honestly, I would question whether we need this offensive cavalry, because you see the Sons of Yorl just getting chewed apart by a mixture of Temple Inquisitors and Drake Broodlings, which have got invisible riders at the moment, but that's just a visual bug. I don't think you can have cavalry units like this that don't have a rider. There's a lot of those fire arrows still going around. Interestingly enough, there are still cavalry units left alive, but not many of them. You can actually see over here that the Riddermark cavalry is going to be able to get into some of Outfit's elite units, and in fact it is the Temple Guard, so a good spot and a good charge there, killing a few Temple Guardsmen. But the Riddermark cavalry needs to keep moving, otherwise it will obviously fall away pretty quickly. They do actually get a charge downhill into the Uruk-hai Reavers, killing a lot of them as well. So it's been a bit of a mixed bag for Alasan here. I don't think he could. I think targeting Rudarl and the Misty Mountains at all with the javelins and with all of the armor-piercing spears there was a bit of a mistake. You can also see him bringing over my Trolls of Angmar, because if I can get Rohan's cavalry in a sustained fight with the Trolls, they're obviously going to get absolutely massacred. I've got my Barrow Wights coming over as well. There's also the Rudar clansmen. Why does it always have to be raining, man? Look at this heavy rain. You can barely see the orcs through it. Yes, the Melkor's chosen. Now the cavalry that we have on the offense, obviously, as we've said before, the defenders it's a fighting retreat essentially. The rear guard action as the real armies sort of get in position and get ready to face the hordes. But the cavalry we have is not going to be too useful, because they do have some nice choke point positions that they're going to be able to use against us, but ultimately Alasan's cavalry has been defeated, and at this point it's going to be forming up. So let's go and have a look at the defensive position over here. So to start off with, they have essentially two sides of the cliff that they have archers on, and worryingly they have rangers. Rangers in this sort of situation are going to be very, very good at thinning out the herd. The Athelian Rangers as well are Gondor's version of this, and they're going to be on the side. They're a little bit close maybe to areas where we could skirmish them down. You don't want Rangers in view of enemy archers, because very quickly Rangers will start to fall away. They don't have the highest armour values. Over here they have a much more heavily armoured archer unit in the shape of the Care Andros Marksman. I think that the Care Andros Marksmen are also very accurate as far as archers go, but again, there are certain stats which are not on the tooltip, so it's a little bit hard to quantify. In addition to the Rangers, who have the body piercing against low armour units, they also have the Javelins here, the Pelagia Marines, who are good against the higher armour targets, of course. And then over here, they also have some Helmingas, the Rohirrim Archer, and some more Pelagia Marines. And then as we look up here, there's just more archers. Wardens of Minas Ithil, who are, or Ithil. I never know how to pronounce that. I think it's Ithil, but again, they are essentially the Master Rangers. There are less of them, and they are very, very susceptible to being focused down. But in a situation like this, it's almost ideal to have them. It will do very, very good, because unlike most Rangers, they do have a pretty high missile damage, which makes them monstrous if you get them in the right position. Some Elisar's Honor Guard Destroyer 220998 is playing as them. We've got some Wardens of the White Tower as well. I believe 2 units of them, in fact, so very tough. Obviously, the Gondorians are yet to have really been committed yet. There are some Rohirrim infantry in addition to the cavalry they had as well, Westmark spears. Fountain Guard on this front line are going to be very solid. The Gondorians are here as well in force, Gondor spearmen and infantry in addition to standard Fountain Guard, and I believe some Citadel Guard as well. So a couple of units of shielded Fountain Guard, so it's going to be tough to bring them down. And then the final army is, well, that's Meduzeld Guard from Alisand, but the final army, in addition to these Westmark infantry and some more Westmark infantry, we have more Westmark spearmen as well, so there's a lot of Rohan infantry all over the place, but there is in fact a Lothlorien army commanded by Starling, so we have a couple of Lothlorien archers. The Karas Kaladhon's Guardians are also here on the front line, 2 units of them as well, which is something you'll hardly ever see, and some Lothlorien blades and some axemen as well, Lothlorien warriors in fact. So we have the, and also up on the cliff there's more of them, well, more archers I should say as I get into position. We have some Helmingas and some veterans of Osgiliath as well with their extra range, some Galathrim nobles and some Sindar archers. So we have to attack essentially through 2 choke points, which are sort of separated by this plateau here in the middle. And we have to send forward our lower tier troops first and then sort of ramp it up into the late game now, based on the fact that Lothlorien actually don't have a full stack, and this is basically to ensure that the defenders can't win. Because if you give Lothlorien a full stack in this situation, it's possible that the defenders could monster these choke points because of how effective the elves actually are. And so, you know, that's not the idea behind this this scenario, of course, because there is a narrative reason for most of the things that happen in these scenarios. So don't blame me for the fact that the attackers are intended to win this one. I have no control over it, I swear. But over here we have obviously the archers on the hills. Now, looking at the vast majority of our armies, obviously we're going to be coming in with our lower tier units first. And Orc lower tier units are going to get absolutely massacred by elves like this. You know, Lothlorien blades, warriors and the Karas Kaladhon Guardians will rip through them. There's also the elven archers up here, which are going to be too dangerous to get anywhere near. So the area we're actually going to focus on is this choke point over here. Despite the fact there are more men over here and it's going to be more difficult to mass push through them, we won't be able to mass push until we commit our Heavy Goblin Spears, our Blackwatch Legion as well. So it's actually a good idea to wear down the armoured Gondorian front line, particularly when you consider that if we look over here, obviously the Misty Mountains, most of their lower tier units, apart from the Goblin Infantry of course, but some of their lower tier spears do have the armour piercing. My Orc Fellas as well, which are some of the lower tier units, do have armour piercing as well, which will be next to useless against the elves, but will be quite useful against the Gondorians. So it's a matter of prioritising your targets here. Going for Gondor is going to be the way forward. As for the elves, ignoring them for the first part and then sort of putting pressure on them later on will be the way to go. Just sort of pinning them in place and making sure they can't move is the more important thing as we try and crack through this choke point over here. Also, there are more deadly archers on the cliff over here. So, I think we will actually speed things along a little bit, and I will actually make a small cut here. So we have goblins in the frontline fight. We have some orc fodder and some goblin infantry, which naturally is going to be absolutely no match for this very elite Gondorian front line. We've got Gondorian spearmen providing the anchor, and then the Fountain Guard in there doing the vast majority of the damage, and of course the goblin infantry already breaks. And Bobo's going to send up his other units of goblin infantry. I'm sending over my orc marauders to just sort of sit near the elves, because if they want to target down my Orc Marauders with their arrows, that's fine. You know, that's a waste of ammunition, really. And it also prevents the elves from counter-attacking as we start to focus down the Gondorian side of this front line. And really, it's going to be interesting to see how many the Gondorians can kill before they start to crumble, because they do have a lot of heavily armoured troops. Some of our armour piercing will do well, but worryingly, of course, there are these archer companies and javelin companies up on this plateau over here, which are going to be able to fire down into our units as they move forward. And in particular, stuff like my Orc Fellas are going to be very, very vulnerable to pushes like that. My Orc Fellas are coming in. The Gondorian infantry is actually a unit which will trade relatively poorly with Orc Fellas, but of course it's really going to be the archers that are going to do the vast majority of the damage. You can see here that there are potentially slight gaps around the side which we could push through. But again, it's all about biding time. Look at that. Look at the dead bodies of the Orc fodder when they charged in. They were just absolutely dumpstered by the Fountain Guard. But it's all about biding our time, because we know that eventually we're going to be able to push through these lines. You know, they're not going to be able to keep this up forever. And it's all about using our units efficiently. And if we charge into the elves, that would be the opposite of efficient. So I've got some Orc Fellas moving up. Arcturus is also sending forward his Dunman Spear, so obviously, this is going to be an interesting sort of... The frame rate's going to be a rocky ride on this one, I'm afraid. Even with the rules preventing us from sort of charging forward. Actually, Froggy did charge into the elves, which I was a little bit surprised about. And then as we look out here, we can see that the Uruk-hai Raiders are fighting to the death, and they won't stand a chance against the Lothlorien Blades. If the elves can get a lot of kills, that will push the percentages into the zone that they want it to be in. The Lothlorien Blades are going to have no problem ripping their way through the Uruk-hai Raiders. Froggy did take the worst of Alisand's cav charges, so he has less of his lower tier units remaining. You can see that my Orc Marauders are just sort of waiting in loose formation, waiting for the call to move in. You can see that there are some Westmark units over there as well. As we have a look up onto this hill, having a look down onto that front line, you can see that there are Orc Fellas. There's also some Snaga. All the lower tier units we have, essentially. The only unit that's going to do much damage in there at all is the Orc Fellas, and I think they are already taking a lot of damage and fire. Rangers, this is a Ranger's dream. They're going to get so many kills in there as the frame rate dies. In danger of a crash indeed. And you can see that the Care Andros marksmen are shooting as they come in. Bobo was actually able to reach them with his heavy goblin archers across the river. And it's not a bad use of his ammo, honestly. I mean, those heavy goblin archers are also taking up some of the ammunition of those Athelian Rangers. And honestly, every Ranger volley that doesn't go into this blob down here... Oh my word. I think there's also the Dunman Pikemen are moving in now, which the Dunman Pikemen will help our lines stay together, but obviously it won't mean we win the battle by any means. Man, that is a disgusting frame rate. Again, you know, this is par for the course with scenarios, really. I mean, I prefer scenarios where this sort of thing doesn't happen just because it makes my life so much easier. And I know people don't like it, but, you know, there's very little I can do about that, I'm afraid. Mercenary War Chiefs moving in as well. A slightly higher tier unit from Rudau coming in. Slightly more skillful, but they're out. Well, their morale is low, so ranged units are likely to do an awful lot of damage to them. Meanwhile, if we move back over to here, we can see that Bobo is actually moving his heavy goblin infantry closer than my Orc Marauders. And I believe that I actually do the same over here. I move my Orc Marauders up to get ready to move in. And again, with the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians here on the front, there's no way we're going to be able to move our way through there with brute force. It would take the Blackwatch Legion and a lot of units to support them to make sure they don't die quickly to make that worth it. But as soon as we send forward our elite units, look at that archer, those Archers of Doom up on the cliff over there, with the Sindar Archers and the Galathram Nobles in particular. Now the Helmingas are the lower tier archers that are up on that hill, so they are starting to fire in with their fire arrows, grilling quite a lot of us. In fact, I think the Helmingas are one of the units where fire arrows actually buffs their strength, which is a bit of a mistake. The Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm are another. Lothlorien archers also using their fire arrows, and I believe they're actually targeting down the Orc Javelins. You know, Goddess Nimhain. We were going to try and send up skirmishers to deal with the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians because they're so dangerous, and we have nothing that can force our way through them at the front at the moment. In fact, I don't think if we sent forward our elites we would even trade that efficiently with them, and that's what the name of the game's all about. Meanwhile, if we move back over to here, the frame rate dies as we move closer. We'll actually, you know, we'll go back here for a minute. Have a look over here. There's actually a unit of Hornberg sentries right here in the back from Alisand. Well, if we go forwards a little bit, we can also see the Helmingas and the Athelian Rangers. I'd like to get closer to the action, but with a blob like that, I daren't risk it because it'll probably just crash the game. at least for the time being. That's a lot of fire arrows coming from the Rohirrim up on this cliff. Let's have a look over here. A lot of the units are in loose formation. The Helmingast don't have elven accuracy, but with how much ground our orcs are covering, they can scarcely miss. So there's also some Reavers in there from Froggy, heavy goblin infantry over there, just trying to thin our ranks, trying to tempt us into moving forward, but honestly, just wasting their ammunition on lower tier troops is fine by us. Bobo actually does move in, and there are the Lothlorien warriors, the two-handed axe. As we can see actually there, the Dunman hunters managing to get into a nook in the cliffs over here, and they will actually be able to fire onto this section of the line. So we'll be able to go for some of the Lothlorien blades, potentially the side of the Karas Galadhon's guardians, and maybe the Lothlorien warriors, depending on what they can hit. But obviously heavy goblin infantry doesn't stand a chance against these elite elven troops, and they will be repulsed. But there are some armor-piercing units coming in, and Lothlorien doesn't rely on armor as much as many factions do, but some of their higher tier units do still have good armor values. So armor-piercing definitely won't hurt in that respect, as they continue to fight. Well, if we go back over to here, we can see that the fight over here is going to be relatively unchanged for the time being, because it's just a churning mass of all kinds of low to mid-tier troops from the orcs, and they're also just being shredded through by Helmingast with their fire ammunition and the Athelian Rangers with their body piercing. The Gondorian front line is holding, but it has taken casualties. That Gondorian infantry, for example, has taken a good few casualties. All of the lower tier troops on the front line have essentially taken casualties. Also, they're starting to tire a little bit, so they're starting to get winded. Although obviously with the elite shielded Fountain Guard and regular Fountain Guard tying the line together, there's no danger of us wearing them down with low tier troops alone. But if we can isolate the high tier troops when our high tiers come in, obviously we should be able to smash the line to pieces. Froggy sending forward what's left of his army. Froggy was definitely the one who had a few more issues than us in the earlier game. I've got my Goblin Trackers moving over to help shoot in on the elves. As we can see, the Dunman Hunters are firing into the elven front line down here, going after the Karas Galadhon's guardians. You know, over here, Bobo's units have taken quite a lot of damage. We've also got the Snaga skirmishers down here, who are trying to get some close-range javelin volleys into the Lothlorien pikemen. Again, they're our solitary target over here, because if we can take those down, the multiple HP pikes, Lothlorien's line is a lot less scary. It's a numbers game at the end of the day. But several of my Orc Marauders are getting cooked alive by those Helmingast up on that cliff, as more and more arrows come in from the Dunman Hunters over on the side. Let's have a look over here. My Goblin Trackers are also firing at the same targets. Just trying to go for the pikes, trying to do what damage I can. Froggy's also sending forward what's left of his army to try and go after them. But as you can see, I noticed Bobo's troops were actually breaking, and now that our archers are over here, the elves, and there is one unit of cavalry that Rohan's still having behind the lines, they might be tempted to come out and try and charge down our men. So I do decide to actually engage my Orc Marauders a little bit, and I think Starling realised that he was getting focused down a little bit, and so he pulls back one of his units of Karas Galadhon's guardians because they were getting targeted by my Goblin Trackers. Good move here from Outfit, because he's going to be moving his Troll Drummers to this area over here, which means I think the sides of both flanks here, so this area and this area, they should be receiving the morale buff from the Troll Drummers, meaning that our units won't easily rout. Because over here in particular, I'm sure you've been noticing that several units here, my Orc Fellas, are routing off. Both my units of two units of Orc Fellas are routing off. My Snaga were also doing so. The Goblins also did so almost immediately when they encountered the Gondorian front line. You can see over here that the Pelargir Marines starting to take a lot of ranged fire. These Snaga are exhausted, but they actually did return from routing. You can see that another wave is coming up, this one from Arcturus, sending forward the Rudour Clansmen. Another unit which could potentially push, but I feel as though waiting until the extra armor-piercing damage of the heavy Goblin Spears would be a much better use of their time. The Pelargir Marines are also firing into this section over here, trying to do as much damage as they can, but our front line's actually starting to struggle quite a bit. Now, I did send forward my Barrow Wights as well. They don't have fantastic combat stats, but they are multiple HP, and that means they will stick in the fight for quite a long time. They aren't very good against arrows, however. It's really a sustained melee fighter. They are the ultimate tar pit in melee. And if I can get them to the front line and just fighting the Gondorians, that's exactly where I want them to be. Other than that, though, it's still mostly trash here on the front line. There are actually some Uruk-hai Berserkers over there from Froggy, but then his army has been committed in the correct way. It's just that his army was mauled by the Rohan cavalry, so he was able to commit his higher tiers before we were. My Goblin Trackers were out of ammunition. Worryingly, over here, though, I think we will just turn the speed down so we can get in a little closer. As we get into this front line over here, you can see that part of our front line broke and the elves were wrapping around the side, the Lothlorien blades coming in, the Snaga skirmishers getting a nice volley off into the side of the Lothlorien blades, and I'm going to engage them in melee just with my goblin trackers just to try and keep the Lothlorien line in check, because my Orc Marauders and what's left of Bobo's heavy goblin infantry, needless to say, will not last very long at all in melee with Lothlorien units like this. So it's just a matter of holding them and pinning them in place. Other than that though, I mean, the attack over here was never really meant to be all that effective. It was just meant to hold and make sure that some of Starling's units had to stay over here. It was really this front line over here that we were focusing on. You can see that even on a lower speed, the frame rate still doesn't like it. We can see that Alasan is actually having to commit more and more of his infantry to keep the Gondorians in line, because at this point a lot of the Gondor spearmen and Gondor infantry have fallen away, and you can see that with the heavy goblin spears over on that front, I think there's heavy goblin spears, indeed there are, we are actually, oh my word, that frame rate, but we are starting to push on this flank over here. So this flank is starting to fall apart a little bit, and that's good, you know, because the flanks are really where we're going to win, because the Fountain Guard are in the middle and they're going to be able to hold out relatively resolutely. You can see over here that there are some Dunman pikemen moving forward from Arcturus, and I think as soon as they've been committed, we can start to commit forward some of our more serious stuff. So we've got Minas Morgul Chosen, I've got my Gundabad Guard, some dismounted Temple Inquisitors. You can see the rest of my elite corps as well in the background with the Trolls of Angmar are also moving forward. This is where Alasan moves forward with his cavalry. His first Marshal's bodyguard is going to try and charge into these soft targets over here, and he is going to go after the Dunman Hunters, which are now open to attack. There are only 33 of them remaining, and First Marshal's bodyguard will naturally just completely smash them into the ground. And they're also going to try and go for the Snaga, I think. But the fact that there were trolls and there were also Uruk-hai infantry over here, also spears all over the place in addition to javelins, I think he quickly realised that after getting a sneaky charge there onto the Snaga skirmishers, I think he realised that he wasn't really going to be able to get much more in terms of value. But he did manage to essentially shut down 2 units of skirmishers. There are still a few Dunman Hunters over here, but there aren't very many of them. They won't be doing much damage now to the Elven line, and the Elves are having a decent amount of success over here as the First Marshal's bodyguard charge into those heavy Goblin archers. Again, killing more. As we have a look at the percentages of kills.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Interestingly enough, we are a long way behind. You know, we have 60% of our army killed. The enemy only has 39% of their army killed. But of course, as soon as we break through one of the lines, the battle is essentially going to swing pretty heavily in our favour. And that is going to happen because as soon as these Dunman pikemen are committed, you can see that already the elite troops are on their way forward. The Blackwatch Legion are on the way. And what I'm going to do with the Blackwatch Legion, again, I can only apologise for the frame rate. I can't really fix it in this situation. You know, I've turned off all of my graphical enhancements and still this is what we get. But what I'm going to do with the Blackwatch Legion is the sides are starting to buckle a little bit. A lot of the regular Gondorian infantry is starting to fall by the wayside now that slightly better troops on our front line are starting to wear them down. One of my units of Blackwatch Legion is going to help Bobo's Heavy Goblin Clansmen push over on the right hand side over there. The other one is going to push in on this side over here. And I'm going to send my Guardians of Khandu up the middle just to make sure that the Shielded Fountain Guard have got some sort of challenge on the front line. And then we should be able to sort of crush the front line from both sides. At least that's the plan. Meanwhile, on the other side, you can see that now the Sindar Archers and the Galathrim Nobles are opening up. They're going to be firing on the Temple Inquisitors and the Minas Morgul Chosen as they move forward. So the Elven Archers have finally been baited into attacking as the Temple Inquisitors charge in. The Lothlorien Warriors. I think the Temple Inquisitors are melee cavalry, but I mean, they're a very scary unit nonetheless. I don't think they have their armour upgrade though. It's weird. Unless you upgrade their armour, they've got this really nasty looking low-res model, which is kind of weird. But yeah, the Minas Morgul Chosen, Goddess Nimhain, sending forward some elite troops over here just to tie up what Rohan and Lothlorien infantry there is over here to make sure they can't retreat and try and reinforce the other way. And the Temple Inquisitors are going to try and cycle charge in. Amazingly, I think my Goblin Trackers are still in melee over there, which is... they're a resolute people. I'm also going to send my Gundabad Guard over here just so we got more spears for the elves to really have to sink their teeth into. Meanwhile, if we have a look over here, the Blackwatch Legion encroaching on both sides. In fact, there are some Black Legion of Barad-dûr as well, so this is going to be really nasty for the defensive line because a lot of the Gondorians are gone, and the Gondorians had a lot of spears which we're going to be able to add to the mass. But at this point, it's mostly Rohan, honestly. Rohan have got some Westmarks infantry, but that's not going to be sufficient to really push us back. In fact, we're going to have to leave that area because the frame rate was dying. where you can see that more and more troops are being committed.
Smash the enemy.
Dismounted Temple Inquisitors. I mean, at this point we do actually need to start doing our work very quickly, because we've only got 13% to play with before, technically speaking, the defenders can count this as a victory. And they've still got just under half their army left alive. But at this point, this is where things are going to dramatically shift in the battle. Again, I'm a little bit sad that I wasn't able to get many close-ups, but that's the nature of this scenario, unfortunately. You can see up there on the hill, Galathram Nobles and the Sindar Archers and the Dunman Hunters are over there waiting. But it's only a matter of time before we break through. In fact, over here, the Elves, a lot of the units that are propping them up over here are actually the Rohirrim. So I'm going to send forward my Gundabad Guard as well. Those Orc Marauders are routing. My final Orc Marauders are finally gone. Meanwhile, over here, I'm actually going to send forward my Trolls as well, because I see an opportunity. Over on that part of the defence, there's only Westmark infantry. Oh my word. Maybe one day someone will make a large-scale scenario like this that doesn't involve blob fights like this. I mean, Bobos didn't have blob fights like this. Here's the first Marshal's bodyguard, so getting in behind the line seems to improve the frame rate a little bit. But you can see that my Trolls of Angmar do get charged by the first Marshal's bodyguard. But my Trolls are also going to absolutely slaughter these Westmark infantry over here. And as soon as we start chipping away at the numbers of the defenders, the faster their demise will come about. Veterans of Osgiliath over there trying to fire their missiles into the blob. And then over here we can also see that Lothlorien archers have pulled out their swords, so they are ready to be committed to melee. But over here, this, with the support of the Lothlorien units, the Rohan units have somewhat stabilised, but it is mainly spearmen over here, which they're going to have a little bit of an issue in fighting. I've got my Gundabad Guard in the background because Bobo asked me not to commit them. I believe he was trying to shoot them with something, these Snaga. But yeah, we've got some Black Uruks as well, and some Heavy Goblin Archers. I think the Archers might be out of ammunition at this point though, because they were targeting the Caer Andros Marksmen. And then we have Lothlorien Archers moving into the front line, trying to shore them up. And they've had a lot of success on this front, but then we haven't really committed anything that's important over here. I mean, we've committed some pretty decent spearmen now, but for most of this battle it's been lower tier troops. We've been trying to skirmish them down as well. While over here was the main focus of our infantry fight. I mean, there are still Trolls alive, 6 of them left alive. They took a bit of a beating from the charges from the first Marshal's bodyguard, but they've made more of a hole in this line. You can see now that Froggy's sending forward his Snaga skirmishers, so if the cavalry comes back, they're going to take some javelin fire. And also I'm going to send both my Witch-Run Blackguard and Hammer Guard onto this flank as well, because there's a lot of squishy Rohan units which are ripe for the killing. And over on both sides, the Blackwatch Legion really helped crush the two sides of the line, in addition to the Heavy Goblin Spearmen and the Black Legion of Barad-dûr. It's a very hard composition now to keep at bay. I mean, if not for the fact that the defenders are intended to lose this battle in some capacity, I would say that's a little bit overkill in terms of being able to bulldoze your way through the line.
Victory will be ours.
Indeed, but how much have we got left to work with? I mean, as you can see, we've very rapidly caught back up to the defenders, and at this point the defenders need to find 7% of kills in order to really consider this a victory. 75% though is honestly not a bad result for them either. I think that's sort of the intended ballpark the outfit was going for, but 80% could be considered a real defensive victory, all things considered. I'm really sorry about the frame rate. I feel as though some of these scenarios, like, they don't really conduce themselves too well to a replay like this, just because I can't get close to them, which kind of defeats the whole point. And it seems to be really prevalent in the 5 versus 3 scenarios. I feel as I'd really appreciate it if, like, a lot of them were, like, I don't mind some scenarios being like heavily blob based like this, but it seems like more than half of them are, and that's a real shame, because I'm not able to show them as well as the creators I'm sure want me to be able to. But here we have the first Marshal's bodyguard, which are going to be able to get in and around and attack Black Uruks. The Atten Moor's Troll Hunters are now coming forward as well, so the Rudar Javelins are going to do heavy amounts of damage. Starling is retreating with his pikemen. And then over here the Westmark Spearmen. I mean, they still have, technically, victory seems like a possibility over on this part of the line, but I mean, it's only a matter of time before the rear charges start to happen, because now Outfit has managed to get his cavalry in behind the line. Temple Inquisitors and the Melkor's chosen going after the elite Lothlorien units. We technically have 5,000 frames left to go, but it's really just a clean-up operation at this point, as these Elven Pikes try to escape their fate, but they're getting ripped apart by troll-short axe throwers and Snaga skirmishers. Their HP can't save them now. You can see that actually my Witch Realm Hammer Guard are also now right through the line. There's still some trolls left alive as we get into the Veterans of Osgiliath. Oh man. No, 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 please. I can't get too close to that blob because it's apparently still too severe. I thought it was going to crash for a second then. I've been looking mainly at this fight because it's less harsh on the frame rate, even though it's the one where we focused on least in the battle. As the Melkor's chosen gets a nice rear charge into the Westmark Spearmen. I can't imagine the Rohirrim infantry is going to last too much longer, even with the support of the elves over here, because now we've got... Actually, those archers do still have a bit of ammunition left. But the Atten Moor's troll hunters are over here as well.
They have lost half their men.
Still some First Marshal's bodyguard. One of the enemies has lost half their men. It is worth saying as well that late on, when just shortly before the lines essentially disintegrated, Destroyer did crash. But having said that, most of the Gondorians, except the Veterans of Osgiliath, who were sort of loitering around back here, were all committed to the front line. So it didn't actually affect the result of things too much, because even if he committed the Veterans to where we were breaking through, they wouldn't have been able to help the Rohan infantry hold for that much longer, in all honesty. But at this point, it's just a matter of defeating what remains. Witch Realm units moving forth. And then as we look up here, I actually did send several units of my infantry over here, along with Froggy, because this is where they're going to retreat to, apparently, up on this hill. And finally, with a fight that's less severe, I'm able to actually zoom in and see some of it. So we've got some LSR's Honour Guard here, facing off against a combination of Witch Realm Blackguard and Guardians of Khandu. But with the superior position, the LSR's Honour Guard should do pretty decently over there. There's also Wardens of the White Tower up on this hill, who Destroyer, I believe, set up in a more defensive perimeter around here, because I think they wanted to fall back up here. But also we've got the Guardians of Khandu. We're obviously not going to beat the Wardens of the White Tower, but it's just a matter of trying to rush forward and bragging rights now for the attackers to see who can get the most kills. But it's always going to be difficult to match up to the attacker with the most ranged power, so with Rudauer's javelins in this situation and axe throwers, it's almost certain that they would get the most kills. The Galathrim nobles are just being hunted down like dogs. Javelins and axes just being thrown into them, halberds and caragors grinding them into the dirt. Having a look at the percentage of kills, well, they've only got to kill 2% more, and that would be sufficient for me to consider this a victory for the defenders. These Snaga skirmishers are actually being accosted by these Sindar archers, which is unfortunate, seeing as my Witch Realm Hammer Guard are basically right there. But again, it's dark, it's laggy. Oh, here come the Drake Broodlings. Man, over there is still a nightmare for the frame rate. I think it's all the dead bodies on the ground. Layers and layers of dead orcs and Gondorians. Meanwhile, the LSR's Honour Guard here are fighting with the Witch Realm Blackguard on the front line. There's also Froggy's Half-Orc Bane Guard offering some more AP. Man. What a grind. It's an interesting idea for a scenario though. Well, there goes Haldir. His bones broken by a Caragor. Or the Drake Broodlings. What are they going to do, I wonder? They're going to go for the archers. I want to see the Drake Broodlings get a clean charge off. They're fast little buggers as well. They're going to go for the Pelagia Marines. Oh no, I forgot, we're near the dead bodies. Bollocks. They do charge into the Pelagia Marines, however. There goes the Gondorian general at the hands of a Bolg's champion. And defeat seems certain as the Drake Broodlings continue to run around. Starling trying to get some more kills. 79%. 81%. That is the magic number. Can they do it? At this point, I'm not sure. They've still got a unit of those Karas Galadhon's Guardians, which will probably take their fair share of kills. Look at that. The Drake Broodlings have got such a lethal charge. These Temple Inquisitors just hacking away at what's left of the Wardens of Minas Ithil, and the Caragors come in to back that charge up. Still just 79%. Someone admitted defeat. I believe that was Alasan, actually. Now those oh no, it was Starling, so he left. And he was the one with the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians, so they were the ones that would have got the kills. So unfortunately, it looks like 1% short of a victory goal I admittedly have kind of made up for the defenders. Oh no, they have made it. So the defenders have, technically speaking, won this encounter, despite the fact they've obviously, you know, not a single one of them will be going home. What have we got in terms of time left? I mean, that's a lot of time left. I think it's just a matter of clean-up, so I think if we just turn it up to time 6. And I know how this battle ends, which we'll get a good look at that when the time comes. But yeah, the defenders managing to meet victory conditions. This was an odd kind of fight to be a part of, though, in terms of the live version of it. Obviously there was a crash, and there were also certain other factors, which we'll go through when we get to the battle statistics screen, I think. Oh, here come the Drake Grouplings, barreling their way through their own men to munch down on some Wardens of Minas Ithil. And there we go. That is the end of the battle. I daren't get too close to that choke point over there because that was a computer killer. But here we go. 80%. I mean, that's wrong, obviously, but I got 775 kills, which was the second lowest on the team. Only Froggy got lower, and he got massacred by the cavalry early on. Rudar got the most kills for the attackers again. Those javelins are going to be very good. This was an odd scenario to be a part of, though. There was a bit of salt being thrown around in the in-game chat, which was kind of weird, all things considered, because I thought the defenders, relatively speaking, did quite well with what they got, considering that the expected sort of result that Outfit was thinking they would get would be 75%, and they did better than that. And one of the things which came up was Starling didn't like playing in this match because he found the army that came to attack his side was awkward to deal with. But honestly, my sympathies for that sort of thing are relatively low, because, I mean, if you're expecting, when you have the choice between attacking a Gondorian spear wall frontline and a frontline made up of Karas Kaladhon's Guardians with Overwatch support from Galathrim Nobles and Sindar Archers, there's no contest there. You know, going into the Lothlorien army is suicide in that sort of situation. You're not going to get any damage done whatsoever. So I feel as though just the fact that being an elf player and not getting the highest amount of kills on the defending side is not a reason to dislike the scenario. I mean, I can understand not having fun because you had nothing but javelins and archers thrown at you. But at the same time, you could have mixed and matched your front line. You could have had the Gondorians on both sides, you could have had the Rohirrim on both sides, and you could have had the Elves on both sides. Like, you could have had the Karas Kaladhon's Guardians be the centre point of both lines on both sides, and then you would have also had the advantage of the Shielded Fountain Guard being on both sides, and the advantage of the Gondorian Mass being on both sides. And splitting up the two elite Elven Arch units would also have given you the highly accurate, highly devastating elite Elven Archers on both sides. So my sympathy for that sort of thing is relatively low, and also people being salty in the in-game chat over something which is essentially a bit of fun and is not to be taken seriously is something which I'm a little bit confused about. Like, I think Alasan was a little bit annoyed that he didn't use his cavalry to full effect in the early game, and then he was kind of moody for the rest of the fight, which is kind of a bit weird. I mean, this is not the sort of thing that you should take seriously. It's a scenario. It's a scenario with a predetermined ending with that at that as well. I mean, the defenders lose. I'd say it would take extremely sloppy play from the attackers to actually lose this scenario. It would take people who are basically completely new to the game in order for the attackers to throw this one away. So, again, bit of a weird one in terms of the actual in-game experience on this one. I'm very sorry for the lag as well, but there's a very limited amount I could do about that. Looking through my statistics, because that's the only one we got, obviously I wasn't really the most significant player in this game, and my trolls were the only ones that broke 100 kills. They massacred their way through the Westmark infantry. The rest of my units, relatively average across the board. Guardians of Khan Doom did okay. The Blackwatch Legion were really only there for the mass to push through the lines. Orc Fellas didn't do too badly, and the Goblin Trackers did okay. Witchram Hammerguard with 72, the second highest. So yeah, I mean, not bad stats across the board considering the fact that you have to go into a meat grinder like that. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this for what it was, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.